are facilitating the very first in-person council meeting in nearly 3 years. This will be telecast via Zoom as well. A few reminders, you do have meeting materials in front of you. Council members, you have slides. I know that the screens are far. You do have slides in your packets. I'm getting a little feedback here. Let's see. I don't think this is going to help, is it? I'm going to switch mics. Just one moment, please. Hello. Is that better? So much better. Okay, so a few reminders. You do have meeting materials in front of you, including materials for our action items on the agenda and for department and federal updates that detail progress in state programs since the last council meeting. For members of the public who are joining us via Zoom, these materials are available online on our meeting webpage. Let's get started with this meeting. The California Interagency Council on Homelessness is hereby called to order on this day, May 31st, 2022 at 1:13 p.m. Will Cal ICH staff member Giselle Sanchez please call roll?
Hello. All right, I will call roll. Lourdes Castro Ramirez.
Here.
Dr. Mark Galley.
Good afternoon, present.
Kathleen Allison.
Present.
Dr. Tomas Aragon. Stephanie Clendenin.
Present.
JC Cooper.
Present.
Susan Demaris.
Present.
Mark Ghilarducci. Lindsay Sin, sitting in for Vito Imbasiani.
Present.
Kim Johnson.
Present.
Nina Johnson Hall. Stephen Keck.
Present.
Veronica Lewis.
Present.
Tamika Moss. Mindy Parsons. Tim Rainey. Nancy Robles.
Present.
Rebecca Ruan O'Shaughnessy. Megan Kirkaby, sitting in for Gustavo Velasquez.
Present.
Joe Xavier. Okay, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Giselle. Before we move to our next agenda item, I do have a few logistics to go over to help the conversation run smoothly today. I would like to remind all members of the public that we will take public comment before any council action item and on informational items as time allows. We will also provide time for general comments at the end of the meeting. To help our meeting stay on track with time, please make sure your comments are related to the current item being discussed or wait until the open general public comment period. We will allow for a maximum of 1 minute each for each comment to keep us on schedule. Giselle, please provide instructions for giving comments for those portions of the meeting, please.
Yes, we will first take comments from the people in the room and then take comments from those joining online. Members of the public who are attending in person may request to give a comment by filling out a comment card. These comment cards are outside this room. Please fill it out with your name and affiliation. Select an agenda item you'd like to provide a comment for and give it to a Cal ICH staff member, and they may bring it up to me so that I may call you to step to the podium. For those connected through the internet, please take a moment to locate the raised hand icon on your screen. This will be used to signal that you want to comment. Please raise your hand only during the item that you wish to comment on. For those joining us by telephone, you may press *9 to indicate that you'd like to comment. Once I call you to speak, you will be instructed to press *6 to unmute yourself, and you will have 1 minute to make your comment.
Thank you, Giselle. With all our business out of the way, I'm thrilled to hand this meeting off to our co-chair, starting with co-chair, Secretary Castro Ramirez.
Thank you so much, Julie and Giselle. Good to be with all of you, council members. Good to be with all of you in person. As Cody mentioned, this is our first meeting in person after almost 3 years. But this is also a testament that in those 3 years, we have accomplished a lot. And so we have a full agenda today, and both Secretary Mark Galley and myself are excited to be here in person and excited to get this meeting underway. I want to also thank members of the public that have joined us either here in person or online. Thank you for being a participant, and thank you for continuing to stay involved and engaged. I also want to express thanks to the staff. I know that pulling something like this together takes a lot of coordination and moving parts, and we appreciate your flexibility, your nimbleness, and your patience with all of us. CalICH allows us all to strengthen communication and coordination across state agencies and departments, and to collaborate with intention on our shared work to prevent and end homelessness. This requires all of us working together, innovating and integrating bold, comprehensive, and person-centered solutions. The state's commitment to preventing and ending homelessness is a direct reflection of Governor Newsom's steadfast commitment and leadership on this issue. The governor has been very clear and has signaled that this issue is a top of mind priority for state leadership. In fact, last month, Secretary Galley and I and the entire cabinet was part of a visit to Oakland to visit the Wood Street encampment to discuss and better understand the complexity that surrounds access to stable housing, access to stable supports, and the complexity that we all know is part of addressing homelessness. We also know that this complexity is largely due to the fact that this is a result of decades-long structural deficits and underinvestment. Underinvestment, whether it be in the housing space, underinvestment in the services space. And so the role of this council becomes even more critically important, right, as we all work together to better align and target our resources to be person-centered, and also, of course, to work in partnership with local communities to measure our progress and to continue to hold each other accountable. Governor Newsom challenged his cabinet, some of which are here as council members and present, and also those that are not with us today that play a critical role. He challenged us to think through how we can continue to address homelessness with an all hands on deck approach to continue to work across sectors with care, with speed, and at scale. The California Interagency Council on Homelessness is poised to be a prime example of breaking down the silos and taking a proactive cross-sector approach as we implement the state's action plan to prevent and end homelessness. Today, we have our co-chair, Mark Alley, and I have the pleasure of welcoming 3 new council members to this meeting. First, I'd like to welcome Acting Director Stephen Keck from Caltrans. Thank you for joining us, Councilmember Keck. I appreciate your partnership and very much appreciate the leadership of Secretary Omishakin as we continue working together. We also have with us a new council member. Welcome to Veronica Lewis. Veronica is the director of the Homeless Outreach Program Integrated Care System, or topics. And in fact, I had an opportunity on Friday to be in Compton visiting a home key site and had an opportunity to visit with her team. And so we're delighted, Veronica, to have you on the council, bringing your perspective and experience to this body. Veronica Lewis was appointed by the Assembly, and we thank the Assembly, of course, for their partnership with us. We also would like to welcome Tamika Moss, and Tamika unfortunately had a prior commitment and couldn't join us today, but Tamika is no stranger to most of us. She is a leader in the space of housing, systems coordination, looking at how to ensure homelessness prevention, policy, and advocacy. She is the CEO of All Home, and so we're excited that she's part of this council, and I'm sure you'll all have an opportunity to engage with her. Again, welcome Veronica, welcome Steve to the council. I'd also like to introduce a new member of the BCSH team that joined us about a month ago, Deputy Secretary for Homelessness, Dakshika Wikrema. Dakshika is joining us remotely over Zoom. In her capacity as Deputy Secretary, she will be working closely with Corinne Buchanan, Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services, and also, of course, working closely with our Executive Director at Cal ICH, Julie Lowe. Deputy Secretary Wikrema has more than 15 years of experience working in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, working to improve systems related to homelessness, housing, and mental health. Later in this meeting, we'll have an opportunity to hear from Corinne and Dakshika as they provide more details regarding the governor's May revised proposals, particularly in the homelessness space. The governor's California Blueprint budget builds on the unprecedented $22 billion package that was focused on housing and homelessness, passed in 2021. And we've already seen tremendous progress across the board as our teams continue to provide technical assistance, support, and of course, getting funding out as quickly as possible through programs like Home Key, the Housing Accelerator, and also the Homelessness Housing Assistance and Prevention Program. As we move into this next phase, we look forward to building on the efforts and progress of these investments, and as the governor has indicated, continuing to provide relief, continuing to expand affordable housing, continuing to address homelessness comprehensively, and continuing to combat climate change. In total, in the May revise and the budget that the governor has proposed, he's providing for $9.1 billion for housing and $9.4 billion for homelessness resources. Within the budget packet, this includes a $500 million expansion of the Encampment Resolution Fund program, which augments the catalytic $50 million that was appropriated this year. I had the opportunity just about 2 weeks ago to visit with members of the Berkeley team that were recipients of an encampment resolution grant. The partners included the City of Berkeley, UC Berkeley, Abode Services, and Village of Love. And they shared with us, one, the appreciation for having the partnership with the state, two, their focus on providing an effort and an approach that restores dignity and health to the members of their community that are living currently in People's Park. And so this encampment resolution grant will provide the support, the services, and the support to the staff to be able to work towards providing holistic solutions that are person-centered. Of course, I'm delighted that we were able, through Cal ICH, to launch the Encampment Resolution Program. 19 communities are participating, 19 communities that have received about $50 million. And we anticipate many more communities participating once the budget gets adopted. And we're hopeful that the legislature will provide support for the $500 million that the governor is proposing. So as I mentioned, we have a great deal on the agenda today. Thank you again for being active council members. And I'm going to go ahead and stop here and hand this over to my colleague, co-chair, Dr. Mark Alley.
Thank you, Lourdes, and really great to be with people in person. I just want to also extend the warmest welcome. Stephen, thank you for joining us today and getting right in. Veronica, thanks for taking the plane up from LA and joining us in Sacramento. Really grateful for your expertise on the ground, thinking about the complexity of LA and the state's homelessness challenges, and bringing that real world perspective. Really appreciated our opening conversation just about staffing and how great all of these opportunities are. But if we don't have the people to do the work, we're in trouble. So bringing that perspective here is going to be a big deal for all of us, a little closer to the ground, and grateful for you and your team's work in LA. To Tamika, wish you were here with us. Understand that you couldn't be. Really looking forward to your ongoing contributions. You've already been a force around this issue, especially focused on equity and the issue of Black persons in California experiencing homelessness. And I'm grateful for your appointment to our council and what you'll be able to bring over time. And then to my old friend, Akshika, great to have you at BCSH. Your expertise and your ability to connect and bring people together is going to be very, very important. Your candor about the difficulty on solving some of these challenges, I think, is going to be really critical. And Lourdes, you're lucky to have such a force like her. So without taking up more time, I do just want to highlight a couple of things. And Lourdes, you brought it up. The May revise, which just happened a couple weeks ago, really in some ways demonstrated the commitment of Governor Newsom, this administration, to really sort of focusing on the sticky, tough issue of homelessness, understanding its connection to so many other issues at the Cal HHS side of this conversation. I think we now see even more opportunity than we had before to invest in the issues of homelessness and behavioral health, whether that's through the Department of State Hospitals, Stephanie and your team, with the investments around felony and competent to stand trial individuals, community-based solutions, better pathways, not just out of homelessness, but out of incarceration and into community-based placements that we know make a difference, not just in the short run, but over the long run. When fully sort of fully ramped up, over $600 million a year going into that population, a huge deal. Right next to you, JC, and DCSH, really the incredible chance to continue to build on Cal-AIM and its intersection. Veronica, we were talking earlier about how Cal-AIM allows us to bring closer some of these important social drivers and opportunities that the budget invests in. And then I just want to take a moment and mention Care Court, which came out sort of in between the May revise and the January budget, a very important policy proposal creating a new pathway for individuals who have certain behavioral health conditions, who often experience homelessness, to not just get off the streets and into stable housing, but to get the treatment that many need and deserve. So this budget is full of exciting opportunities. I think for a silo-busting council like the one we have here, our challenge, and this comes up in a couple of our agenda items today is really how do you turn these tremendous budgetary opportunities into real actions that impact people's lives on the ground. And so as we kind of enter into the meat of our agenda, I ask each of you to take that responsibility very seriously, not just within your own entities that you are responsible for, but challenge each other to talk about how we scale those silos and walls and bring them down effectively to keep the person at the center, like we like to say at Cal HHS. So I believe I'm turning it back with that to, who do I go to next?
I think we
Julie,
go
maybe?
to item
No.
number 3, consent calendar.
The consent calendar.
I'll pass it
Is
back
that
to Giselle. Thank you.
Okay,
Yes, thank you. So we have the consent calendar. As a reminder, this is for regular and non-controversial items that need to be approved by the council. We have one item, the adoption of the January 27th meeting summary. We have not received any public or any comments from in-person public comments. We will move online. Again, this is for comments only on the consent calendar. There is time after at the end of the meeting for general comments. Does anyone in the public have, anyone joining on Zoom may raise their hand to indicate that they would like to comment. Again, if you're joining by phone, you may press *9 to indicate that you would like to comment. Seeing that we have no hands raised, I would like to ask for a motion to approve.
I move to approve the consent calendar. Kim Johnson.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Susan DeMorris, I'll second that.
Great, thank you. Okay, I will now call roll. Lourdes Castro Ramirez.
Here. This is not about attendance. This is about voting. Yes, aye.
Great. Dr. Mark Galley.
aye.
Kathleen Allison. Aye. Stephanie Clendenin.
Aye.
JC Cooper.
Aye.
Susan DeMorris.
Aye.
Lindsay Sin.
Aye.
Kim Johnson.
Aye.
Tina Johnson Hall, which I believe is not present. Stephen Keck.
Abstain.
Veronica Lewis.
Aye.
Tim Rainey. Also not present. Nancy Robles.
Aye.
Megan Kirkby.
Aye.
And Joe Xavier.
Aye.
Right. The adoption of the meeting summary passes. We may move to the next item.
Okay, next item, item number 4, the local homelessness action plan, and we will turn this over to Victor Durone, Cal ICH Grants Director.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary. And thank you, council members, for this opportunity to present to all of you. Before I begin, I'll do a quick sound check. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. So I'm here to share and get some information or get some input from all of you on the framework that we've developed for reviewing and approving the local homelessness action plans and grant applications that we will be receiving. And let me first begin by saying how much I really appreciate this opportunity. It's so rare and notable to receive input from executive leadership across the state government like this. So I thank you all for your time and for your engagement. Recognizing that there are many new members and this was reflected in the roll call, some folks for whom this may even be your very first meeting. I'll begin with a quick overview of what the Homelessness Housing Assistance and Prevention, or HAP program is. So we're going to be talking about what is known as HAP 3. which is the third and largest round of HAP funding that the state has dispersed to date. And it also comes with substantively greater accountability enhancements over prior rounds of funding. So this is $1 billion of flexible homelessness block grants to expand local capacity and address immediate homelessness challenges in support of regional coordination and direct services. Eligible grantees include all 44 continuums of care, all counties, and large cities, which we define as cities with a population of over 300,000. And the funding is distributed through a formula allocation based on the point in time count. In other words, it's a block grant that is distributed based on the proportion of the population of people experiencing homelessness within each grantee's jurisdiction. A couple of new elements that have been added over the prior rounds of HAP into HAP 3. Now grantees must submit an application packet that includes a local homelessness action plan and measurable performance goals. And in addition, grantees may be eligible for significant bonus funding if they meet all of the targets established in their performance goals. And these funds have a 5-year life cycle, so they must be expended by June 30th of 2026. Next slide, please. So the HAP application packet, which includes the homelessness action plan and the performance goals, is made up of 4 parts. And you'll hear me moving forward referring to this as the application packet. Part 1 is a landscape analysis that includes analysis of the needs of the people being served by that jurisdiction, demographic information on the people being served, and then an analysis of the funding that's available. And this isn't just funding from HAP or from Cal ICH or even from the overall homelessness response system. This is all of the different funding sources that could be brought to bear, even those funding sources that are perhaps funded by some of your programs, but that aren't typically seen as part of the homelessness response network. Part 2 of the application packet is outcome goals and strategies for achieving these goals. And the outcome goals in particular are a new and important component. These are specific, these are measurable, these are based on baseline data that's established for the entire state, and eligibility for bonus funding will be dependent on meeting these goals. And in addition to establishing these goals, the grantees must articulate the strategies that they will use to achieve them. Part 3 is an application narrative that asks the grantees to expand on other information, including regional coordination across different systems, including those systems that many of you may lead, even those that may not traditionally be seen as part of the homelessness response system, but that we want our grantees to begin partnering with. Capacity building, equity-related efforts, and ensuring that all of these efforts are in alignment with the local action plan goals and strategies. And then there's part 4, the HAP 3 funding plan. And this looks at specifically how they will use the funds being appropriated through HAP and the specific activities that they will fund. A couple of items on the timeline. So the deadline to submit is coming up very quick. June 30th is the deadline for all grantees to submit their application packet. However, we have a 90-day window, Cal ICH staff, to continue working with the grantees to either review and approve the application packets or to provide feedback and request amendments in order to get final approval. Next slide, please. I also want to share some of the really robust supports that my team has brought to bear in a very short period of time. In the last 3 months, as we've quickly ramped up this brand new program, in addition to standing up the infrastructure for the program, we've also deployed a variety of supports to our grantees in advance of this June 30th deadline to submit. This includes, we have held individualized local action plan engagement sessions with all 76 grantees. And in almost all instances, many of their partners attended these sessions as well. So individualized engagements with everyone to make sure that they understood the requirements and provide some initial technical assistance. We've also brought to bear specialized technical assistance through 4 contractors with a range of expertise on areas including equity, goal setting, and data analysis. We've conducted 5 TA webinars on development of the local action plans and the performance goals, and we've been holding bi-monthly grantee office hours and additional technical assistance drop-in sessions. Next slide, please. So all of you will have received in your packets for your review, and also in the packets that are available for attendees to look at, the really robust process that our team has developed for reviewing all of the elements, flagging areas that need to be elevated, and the process for reviewing them at a higher level as needed. This is a very lengthy description that all of you will have received, but I will provide a kind of higher level overview of some of the key takeaways for each of the sections and some of the strategies we will use in reviewing the applications. So each of the applications, as I said, has 4 sections, and they're going to be reviewed both for meeting statutory compliance. In other words, what are the requirements in the letter of the law? But just as importantly, they're going to be reviewed for quality in alignment with the mission and the best practices and the spirit and the intent of the law. So part 1, that landscape analysis of needs, demographics, and funding, will of course be ensuring that it's responsive to statutory requirements. We will ensure that it's based on reliable data sources, and we will ensure that it demonstrates alignment across overlapping jurisdictions. In other words, if a city and a county and a continuum of care that all share a service area, we're going to make sure that there's alignment across the data that they submit. For part 2, outcome goals and strategies, we'll make sure that the goals are suitably ambitious and logically aligned with the data that they've presented. We'll make sure that they're focused on areas needing the most improvement in their jurisdiction. We'll look to see if they are complemented by appropriate and trackable equity goals. In other words, making sure that services are being provided to the most marginalized and impact members of their community. We'll ensure that they are supported by strategies that align with the best practices in housing first. That they are inclusive of strategies that extend beyond HAP resources. In other words, making sure that they are leveraging and partnering with all of the different systems across the state that many of you lead, and then leveraging resources and strategies from overlapping districts, from overlapping jurisdictions. Part 3, the narrative. Again, we will make sure that they demonstrate regular and reliable cross-jurisdictional collaboration. Again, making sure that those cities, COCs, and counties that share service area, when we look across their application packets, if they submitted separately or if they submitted jointly, whether they submitted separately or jointly, that they're clearly working together. Reflective of strong partnerships across all relevant systems and sectors. So not just across the jurisdictions, but across all of the different systems like education, labor, services for older adults and people with disabilities that all of you represent. We will look to specific actions that enhance equity and access to services, and specific and quantifiable system level improvement strategies. So not just strategies for improving outcomes and service delivery, but for the system at large. And then finally, the HAP3 funding plan. We will review to make sure that they are describing the specific activities to be funded through HAP. They are reflective of investments that are complementary to other resources. In other words, making sure that folks are being really strategic, right? Recognizing that there's a variety of resources and programs that already exist out there, making sure that HAP is enhancing or filling gaps rather than duplicating. Looking for investments that support activities to advance progress towards those measurable goals. And of course, making sure that all statutory requirements are met, such as the 10% youth set aside, the set aside for serving for developmentally appropriate services for youth experiencing homelessness, or the limit on how much funding can be spent on administrative costs. Next slide, please. So as the HAP3 review and approval process is carried out and completed, my team will report regularly to all of you on pertinent information in the coming council meetings. And this will include reports on the applications that we receive, that we approve, and that we return for amendments, and any other pertinent information related to that process. A summary of some of the strategies, partnerships, and investments that we're seeing across the state that may be of interest to the council. Opportunities for state activities to support local efforts. So we're going to keep an eye on what are some themes or what are some strategies that are happening at the local level that perhaps are something that we at the state level leadership could be helping support. And then of course, quarterly progress towards meeting those performance goals. So on a quarterly basis, we will be sharing out how we are doing across the state towards meeting those measurable performance goals that have been set by our grantees. So in terms of next steps, next slide, please. Upon council input and approval, my team will promptly begin applying this criteria as we receive the applications packets. The grants team will also begin preparing a report out and lessons learned for the next council meeting and in preparation for HAP 4, which is going to be just around the corner. So with that, I'd like to pass it back to our co-chair, Secretary Castro Ramirez and Secretary Gali, to facilitate discussion questions, which are on the next slide. And I'm very excited to hear questions and input.
Thank you so much, Victor. Thank you to you for your leadership in pulling the guidance and really building this from the ground up. As Victor mentioned, this is the first year that Cal ICH is implementing this requirement of establishing local homelessness action plans. They are tied to HAP 3.0, so the third round of HAP funding, and they're also connected to HAP 4.0. Because it's a new requirement, as Victor mentioned, there has been significant technical assistance provided by staff, webinars, individual support, and I do think that it's important to acknowledge that overall there's been very strong engagement from cities, counties, and regional partners that will be submitting local homelessness action plans. And this is an important point because I think it's important to acknowledge that as the local homelessness response system and providers are working towards providing the level of support and access and connection, I think that they also are in agreement that having a plan that helps their partners get organized, prioritize the populations that they're serving, outline the solutions and strategies, and also be able to measure their progress is important, right? It's an important component of this relationship that we have with locals, with the state, but also the relationship that we have with the individuals that are being served through the homelessness response system. And so with that, I'd like to maybe turn it over to Secretary Gali first for his perspective and remarks, and then we'll open it up for questions. We do have some questions ready to prompt, but of course, if you have any other questions or thoughts, welcome. We welcome them all.
Yeah, Lourdes, echo your points, and Victor, congratulations to you and the team. I know this is ongoing work. It's hard work. I know when we were sitting down over a year ago thinking about what does this notion of transparency and accountability look like, it's always a hard set of challenges to take on because the funding is so desperately needed locally. People just need the funding to get going. And then we layer on really requirements to work together, to come across silos, to be transparent and accountable around measurable outcomes. I think this is hard work, but really important. So the dollars that are being invested in our local jurisdictions, really we start to tell the comprehensive story about partnership and building towards the outcomes we want to see. So I know this is not easy work, and it's going to take some time to really get into the rhythm and be able to focus on this. But it sounds like we're off to a good start on that front. So congratulations.
Thank you, Secretary. Comments, questions? Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you, Victor. I'm really excited as a practitioner on the ground and also working closely with our COC and county as they've developed 1, 2, and 3 to see the progression and the improvement to Dr. Gali's point about removing some of the restrictions. I have a couple of questions just to clarify. So when you say 5 years and I count 2026, that's not 5 years. So can you clarify how you got to 5 years or what that really means?
That's a great point. That's a great point. I thought of it as I said it. So it's 5 years from appropriation. So in truth, by the time we get everything out, grantees really end up with 4 years. You're correct.
Okay. And then in terms of the mainstream, the alignment with the jurisdictions,
I think that's pretty clear. You can look at the responses, but I appreciated what you said about the alignment with the other systems that address folks that are experiencing homelessness or houselessness. So can you say a little bit more about how you're going to determine that, or maybe that's what you're asking us to help you figure out, but I want to hear a little bit more about the plan to ensure that the folks that are applying or the jurisdictions applying are going to be doing the mainstream system, for lack of a better term, coordination.
Sure, that's a great question. And yes, would certainly love input from this group. In fact, a couple of the questions, the discussion questions we have up speak specifically to that. But what I can share that we've done is, part of our messaging as we've been talking to all of our grantees is we've been really clear. This is not your HAP plan. This isn't even your homelessness response system plan. This is your plan to end homelessness using every system that is available within your community, whether or not it is considered part of the traditional homelessness response system. So that has been our message that we have been saying at all of our engagements, all of our individualized conversations, and at each of those individualized conversations, as well as through our materials, our technical assistance, we've really been emphasizing that what we want to see, of course, is the different collaborations across the homelessness response programs, but we also want to see connections with managed care plans, with education, with workforce development, with services for older adults and people with disabilities. I'm sure I'm going to leave, we have a long list and I'm sure I'm going to leave several things, justice involved individuals and the systems that support them, right? So behavioral and mental health. So we've been really, really clear that we want to see those partnerships. We've been putting it in our technical systems. We've been asking folks in our individualized engagements to describe what they've done, and if there isn't much, share some possible additional strategies. We will be looking to that as we review the applications that come in, but certainly would love to hear any thoughts from you. And in fact, one of the questions we have is, we'd love to hear what are some ways that you have seen within your system strategies for success in cross-system partnership.
Yes, of course.
One more follow-up. So with that said, does HAP3 fund regional coordination or cross-system coordination activities? Because I think that's my answer to your question. Does it pay for that?
It does. It does.
Okay.
In fact, we have HAP3 and HAP4, but HAP3 in particular, we had an initial disbursement that we really specifically said we would love to see you prioritize capacity building and cross-system collaboration.
Yes, Councilmember Johnson.
Kim Johnson, DSS. I also want to appreciate you, Victor, and the team for putting this together. In terms of your question here on the slide related to reporting, really appreciate what's coming to us. In addition, especially with HDIS, looking for what else we can be doing to continue to make our data systems the most robust, to be able to ensure that we are really being able to tell the story on the outcomes that are outlined, and glad to be a part of that and solutioning as we talk about it in this group. I also just want to note, would love to continue to hear from the grantees on other, I know that you have here strategies for achieving those outcome goals, but would love to hear from grantees on other things they think the state could be doing to further leverage these investments and take them further. I know in previous iterations of this body, there have been things like the financing guide that has talked about the various funding streams, target populations, et cetera. So if there are other things that we could be doing to further leverage the funding in community, would be grateful to have that input as well when you bring that back to the council.
Absolutely. Thank you, Director Johnson. And that is specifically one of the items that we intend to report back on. Is we're going to look for opportunities as we have this bird's eye view of all of the applications. Where are we seeing ways that common threads throughout the local strategies that could be supported by the state level leadership? So absolutely appreciate that.
JC Cooper with DHCS. First, Victor, thank you so much for your partnership. Our team has really enjoyed working with you as we have been building our own housing and homelessness incentive program, and your leadership with our team has been amazing. One piece that I wanted to flag was really around the landscape funding that Kim just mentioned. When these come in and we're looking at it, I think one of the pieces that I would really like to see, or any of your thoughts around, how are we going to ensure that they really have braided much of the local funding or have a very comprehensive approach at there. There's a lot of new dollars coming in, and you mentioned earlier the managed care plans. We are putting funds out through our managed care plans. We are putting new Medicaid dollars, wanting to make sure those get infused into these plans whenever possible, I think would be a huge thing for us. And if we can provide that technical assistance for the Medicaid side or those managed care dollars, we would be more than happy to continue to partner there to make sure everybody is fully taking advantage of that. Then the other piece I would mention in regards to the overlapping areas, with 5 months of enhanced care management and community supports being out, one of the biggest things we're hearing from providers on the ground is a lack of housing opportunity for behavioral health individuals, especially people with serious mental health conditions. And so would really love to see any report out when applications come in, unique, innovative ways around how people are working to address that issue.
Thank you so much. And also, let me just say, working with your team has been fantastic. You have a fantastic team there. They've got a big lift, and it's been a real pleasure to work with them on their the HIP program that they've been developing. But no, absolutely great points. And a lot of this is going to be an opportunity for us to incorporate these lessons learned as we look at how we're going to do this review for the HAP4 program, which will be coming online towards the end of this calendar year.
Hi, Victor. This is Susan DeMorris, Director of Department of Aging. And I really appreciate your slide that showed all of the opportunities for technical assistance pre-award. That's going to go a long way. The discussion question at the bottom about the data that would be helpful, we'd love to see at the conclusion of round 3, what populations have been targeted based on the local landscape, and be able to determine for round 4, who has potentially been overlooked. And the sense is with older adults, they often might rank 3rd or 4th in priority. So they make the list, but they're not a priority. And it would be helpful before the next round to see who perhaps has not benefited from 3 rounds of funding.
Thank you, Director. That's a really concrete, actionable, fantastic recommendation that we could absolutely look at as we prepare for what we would do in HAP4. So what I'm hearing is, as we look at HAP3, make sure that we have an eye towards analysis of the equity component and see if within the equity component there are gaps, and how we can both lift those up and support folks in addressing those gaps as we turn to HAP4.
Thank you. What I just heard reminded me in terms of outcomes, the question related to outcomes. So given that, going back to my point about the mainstream system coordination, I'll say that part of what we're looking at is making sure we're using those dollars outside of the homeless services system, in particular, with partners like public social services and child welfare, to make sure that if folks can be caught before entering the homeless services system, that we do that. So I think that one of the things I see missing from the outcomes is, if we're going to require the jurisdictions to submit information about how they're coordinating, I feel like there should be a couple of outcomes tied to what is the consequence of how many were we able to prevent some people from entering the homeless services system by, training or developing the capacity of some of the mainstream systems that are touching these folks first. Like, I think there should be something related to an outcome, or at least one outcome related to what is the result of increased coordination across other systems. Because if we're asking for people to do that, then there should be an outcome being able to demonstrate what that looks like. And it could just be, it may not necessarily be a quantitative outcome related to people, but it could be in terms of like what additional, barriers were we able to remove, right, for people attaching to multiple systems. But there should be some type of outcome related to multi-system coordination, given who we are in council, and then given the strong encouragement that the state is trying to put on jurisdictions to do that type of coordination.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is having an eye towards the upstream, right? And looking at how the efforts that we are putting forward connect not just to the outcomes through interventions, but sort of upstream prevention. A couple things I'll say about that is prevention is one of the allowable uses for the HAP funding. The performance goals are set in statute, so it would be challenging to build something in there, but I think that there's opportunities to have an eye for this in future rounds and also look at the element around systems level changes and improvements. And to your point, it may not be a quantitative goal, it may be more of a qualitative, how are those system improvements resulting in capacity for all of the systems for upstream impacts.
If I may, I just wanted to build on the point that Councilmember Lewis made regarding the importance of multi-system collaboration and encouraging that level of coordination and planning together, particularly for those communities where we are seeing they're basically submitting plans that are individual plans. The city submitting a plan, the county submitting a plan, the continuum is submitting a plan. So to the extent that as these plans come in, and I know that the staff is going to be looking at these plans collectively, right? But I appreciate the comment that to the extent that we can, as we review these plans, we can have conversations with grantees that point to coordination of systems across, and also maybe that help identify that there is already some common ground, because there are 6 indicators that everybody's working towards. Now it's a matter of ensuring that there's clear delineation of sort of roles and responsibilities, and that folks are rowing sort of in the same direction. And so I just wanted to sort of put a fine sort of point on that, because this is what we're aiming for, right? Greater clarity in terms of the population that's being served, greater clarity in terms of the roles and responsibilities of the various system partners, and greater clarity in terms of the outcomes that folks that are involved are aiming for, so that at the state level, we're able to provide better support and also lift up the practices and approaches that seem to be getting to those outcomes, and also those best practices that are replicable, that we can take to other communities and learn from. Yes.
Kathleen Ellison with CDCR. I do have a question as it relates to the justice involved population. Are those part of your rating when determining who's going to get funding, if they're providing support for justice involved, whether it be state release to parole or county releases to community supervision?
So the grants are distributed on a formula block grant. They're not competitive grants per se that get scored and ranked, but rather, it's sort of here's your block allocation formula, and either you've met the requirements to receive your funding, or you haven't, and we provide input for you to amend. And one of the areas that we have asked all of our grantees in our local engagement conversations to look to is how are they partnering with the law enforcement systems to support justice involved individuals, but recognizing that this is a very flexible block grant and that the intent is that it be locally driven. We don't get to that level of specificity in what we require them to do, but rather ask them to articulate to us within the framework of their local community and what makes sense and what resources are available, how they plan to partner with the local systems to serve justice involved individuals, and how those partnerships will support meeting the performance goals that they've set.
Thank you very much. I just have one follow-up comment. I will say that one good thing that came out of COVID, Dr. Ghali, believe it or not, something good did come out, and that was Returning Home Well, which was started over the July 4th weekend, 2020, which was $15 million of state funds and $15 million of philanthropy money to stand up a place for everyone to go. And we stood up about 1,000 beds in a very, very quick amount of time. And we're able to provide population, whether go into community supervision or state parole, a soft place to land for about 6 months, where the average is about 135 days that the population stayed with us. So that's what I would say would be a very successful program. We have continued with funding year after year, and yet have another request this year. My point is, even with all the beds that CDCR has, approximately 3,000 out in the community that are funded, we know that we have 8,000 homeless parolees, and only 3,000 beds for them. So anyway, I just want to point that there's still a huge delta out there.
Just building on your comment, Kathy, and tremendous success, I know, and we're still only scratching the surface. But Victor, to the point, this is a process in evolution, right? This is the first year, and we're going to see what sort of collaborations come across, where some best practices are, and for future rounds, there might be opportunities to really hone in on certain populations, whether it's those who are justice involved or those with serious behavioral health conditions. So I think this is definitely a place where this council needs to keep an eye on, and Victor holds you accountable for holding these plans accountable. I think it's going to be very, very key and important. And this is where we're starting, but not where we're ending necessarily, which I think is a really important message for everybody here to hear. I wanted to address your third question as I've thought about it, and Lourdes, you and I have talked a little bit about this. We really wanted to see, the way I like to describe it is, if you share dirt, you should come in together. And there isn't always the case. A city and a county might not, for whatever reason, be on the same page. Maybe it's a little bit of politics, maybe it's a little bit of history, but we want to be able through this process to really push jurisdictions who haven't necessarily broken down the silos themselves to have this funding source not be contingent necessarily on breaking down those silos, but encourage that from happening. So certainly, as we get these applications in, Victor, I think it will be important to understand from entities that chose not to apply together to understand what got in their way. And whether that's off the record or on the record, so that with future rounds, we can maybe put things in that promote breaking down some of those silos. Because at the end of the day, parallel systems are not person focused enough. We can do better, and I think we want to get this started as you've outlined, but really push ourselves in the future to do even more.
Hi, Megan Kirkby from HCD. Really want to continue to emphasize that last comment in particular. I mean, we have a strong experience with the housing element systems with local cities and counties doing their housing planning there, as well as they're required to report annually on their progress towards that through the annual progress report system. And we used to be at 30% compliance because there was no incentives and no consequences for people to do their reporting. And so I think it is important to be asking these questions, but be looking to those either incentives or disincentives that you're going to be using, because we know that folks still need help with this collaboration. I think to that degree, I would just say I think it's on your list already, but we are in a new cycle of housing planning for the housing element cycle. Considering homelessness is a requirement through that process. I mean, that you're going to be in different phases for different communities here, but I think the continuums of care don't always connect back to their local cities and counties perfectly. And I think that's an important collaboration here. I think I really liked the idea of this being an evolution. I think if this is going to be a positive evolution of continuous improvement, we do need some way to catalog these sort of lessons learned that we're getting out of this first year. And in terms of what would be reported back to us, I think some kind of summary, like you said, whether it's anonymized or whether it's really on the record, I think we're open, but some way to understand sort of what was working and what was not. And then I think certainly to us, the HMIS piece feels important here, and making sure people have the support they need to be getting that data into the system and in a way with data integrity as well, so that we're all getting good evidence of our progress and understanding where there isn't progress, where there's still gaps.
Great, thank you so much for that point. If there are no additional comments, this is an action. We have one more comment. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Lindsay Sin, on behalf of Dr. Imbasiani from the California Department of Veterans Affairs. First, thank you to the council, Victor and your team, all of this work, putting this together. It's an incredible feat. Just regarding a quick question, and forgive me if I missed it, regarding the applicants' programs, as they put the plans together and submit them for review, what tools are you using to compare how they identify vulnerable populations within a jurisdiction? What tools will those be so that you can accurately verify that those are in fact the populations that need the services that they're proposing in their plans? And what are some of the ways that you envision being able to verify that these groups are bringing the right people to the table? So for example, do you have a checklist to say, in the case of veterans, that you know the appropriate veteran service organizations or U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs or county representatives would be invited to the table as part of that program? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really great question, and it's something that we really worked hard on and developed a number of resources to address. One of the things that we're very excited and proud of is we brought to bear some really robust data analysis that has been individualized for each of the grantees on a wide spectrum of areas, using a standardized formula so that it's apples to apples across all of our grantees. And one of the biggest parts of that data suite that we've provided is specifically around communities that are underserved or disproportionately impacted by homelessness. This, of course, includes a wide variety of demographic and racial information, but also includes other subpopulations like veterans and survivors of domestic violence, people with significant behavioral health needs. I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but we have really robust data going back several years, broken out by the different subpopulations, broken out by a variety of different performance and outcome metrics that have been provided. We've brought in a contractor that specializes in equity-based performance goal setting, that is providing individualized and group technical assistance to help our grantees do that good thinking. We're going to be looking at the data that they've provided in their landscape of needs and demographics and services to see if it aligns with the strategies and the goals and the data that we provided. So in other words, if the communities that they are going to focus on for the purpose of equity, if we don't see alignment between the strategies and the communities of focus and what their data and their needs assessment is saying and what our data suite that we provided is saying, we're going to have a conversation and we're going to require some amendments to what they've brought forward. But we also recognize that this is an area, like all the other areas that have been flagged, that's an opportunity for continuous improvement. And so, we've already just today gotten from you some great recommendations on how we can look to that. But that, yes, absolutely, this is top of mind, and this is something that we provided a lot of robust tools and strategies for, and that we will continue to build that suite of tools out for.
Thank you, Victor. And I'll just remind the council that what we're voting on today is the framework for reviewing the applications as they come in, the local homelessness action plans. The staff will be providing a report back to this council at the September 1st meeting. At that time, we will hear from the staff regarding the plans that have come in, which of those plans have been approved, which may have been denied or require further engagement. And also, as Victor mentioned earlier, they will also be providing a report that begins to lift up lessons learned and some of the strategies or best practices that we're already beginning to identify. So this is an action item, and because it's an action item, we will also be taking comment from the public. So I will turn this over to Giselle to facilitate that portion, and then we'll come back to the council to consider this item.
Yes, since this is an action item, we will be taking public comment. This is for the approval of the process and criteria outlined in the memo. We have not received any public comments from attendees in person, so we will go to attendees joining online. For those connected online, please select the raised hand icon in the meeting window of your computer. We will unmute you and allow you to comment. For those joining by phone, you may press *9 to indicate that you would like to comment. Once I call on you to speak, you'll be instructed to press *6 to unmute yourself. You will have 1 minute to make your comment. Please keep comments specific to this agenda item. There will be time for general comments at the end of this meeting. We do have one hand raised. This is from Andre Bueno. Andre, you should be allowed to speak. Hello, Andre Bueno, are you able to unmute yourself?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we could hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. My name is Andre Bueno. I work at the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles. We've been working with a number of private equity funds to drive success in cross-sector investment coordination within the space. We've seen them offer to acquire and preserve a workforce housing while providing a mixed income allocation to help individuals who are experiencing homelessness. And in exchange, our housing authority has been providing tax abatements and I guess different funding mechanisms per the emergency housing vouchers for these individuals. So I was wondering, has this been aggregated really at a state level to exemplify the work that has been done, across various municipalities?
Thank you for your comment. I see no more hand raised. We could move to a vote.
Thank you, Giselle. So I just wanted to remind us all, particularly for those of us, for the individuals that have joined us for public comment portion, that the council cannot comment or respond directly to comments that are presented, but we appreciate your comment and we'll take it into consideration. So at this time, we've had an opportunity to discuss and deliberate, and I'd like to ask if the council is ready for a vote, and if so, we can entertain the motion. Yes.
I'm Susan DeMorris. I would move approval of the local homelessness action plan framework.
This is Megan. I can second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Any discussion?
I'm sorry, there's one more thing I want to add, if that's okay, really quick. And I don't know if Victor's still there but as I've listened to everyone in terms of the bullet number 2, what other evidence can we see? I think a narrative is fine, but Victor, I don't know if you can do it this round, maybe round 4. It would be great to see a matrix, right? Because people can say, jurisdictions can say whatever they want to say, but literally, you have a laundry list. There's probably about 15 different main systems that you can look at. And across the board, if they could fill out, like no coordination, referrals only, direct contacts, integration, co-location, like there's about probably 7 levels of coordination. And I think if you don't have time, because I know that we're under a time crunch for this, to do it this round, I think it would be helpful for them to actually demonstrate for all the different systems that the state has identified are important for grantees to coordinate with, literally show us across the board, self-indicate and report what level of coordination are you at with each of these systems. I think that would show us a lot more or be helpful in addition to the narrative. So just something to think about.
Thank you, council member, for that comment. So you're not amending the motion, just a comment for future. Great. Okay, so we have a motion and it's been second. I think we can go ahead and do roll call, Giselle.
Thank you. I would like to note that Dr. Tomas Aragon from the Department of Public Health has joined us. We will move to a vote. All right. Lourdes Castro Ramirez. Dr. Mark Galley.
Aye.
Dr. Kathleen Allison.
Aye.
Dr. Tomas Aragon. Stephanie Clendenin.
Aye.
JC Cooper.
Aye.
Susan Damaris.
Aye.
Dr. Vito Imbasiani.
Lindsay Sin for Dr. Imbasiani, abstain.
Kim Johnson.
Aye.
Stephen Keck.
Aye.
Veronica Lewis.
Aye.
Nancy Robles.
Aye.
Gustavo Velasquez.
Megan Kirkby for Gustavo Velasquez. Aye.
Thank you. And Joe Xavier.
Aye.
Right, the motion passes. We could move on to the next agenda item.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to quickly turn it over to Dakshika and Corinne to walk us through the May revision budget proposals. I'm not sure who's going first, but we'll hear from both presenters, have a brief discussion here, any questions, and then wrap this up. But like I said earlier, exciting investments to share a bit about. Dakshika, are you going first? Great, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Galley, and thank you, both of you, Dr. Galley and Secretary Lourdes Castro Ramirez, for those warm words of welcome. I feel very fortunate to be part of such excellent and diligent teams, both at BCSH and get to work with the folks at HHS as well. So looking forward to working together very closely. So next slide, please. I'm going to quickly go over some of the California blueprint investments on housing and homelessness. Some of you may have already heard some of this during our May stakeholder calls, but wanted to give you some quick highlights so that this group and folks listening in have a sense of the proposed investments through the May revision. So first of all, and I know Secretary Castro Ramirez mentioned a bit of this as well, the California blueprint proposes $9.1 billion for housing and $9.4 billion actually for homelessness. And I'm going to go over today 2 departments, Housing and Community Development Department and Cal ICH, and what some of the investments will be. First, you see the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. There's $2.7 billion, which will really help renters who are at risk of losing their housing. And if they applied before March 31st, there will be funds available through this program to make sure they can remain housed. It's interesting to note that this is the largest such program in the nation, and we will end up supporting over 300,000 households in California because of this emergency rental assistance program. So an important upstream prevention measure. The other program we'd like to highlight is adaptive reuse. There's $500 million, as you can see, that's been proposed to really upgrade infrastructure and convert underutilized buildings, convert them into housing. This brings the total investment along these lines to 600 million over 3 years. So this is again an important kind of strategy to think through how we can increase the portfolio of housing. Home Key, which many of you I'm sure have heard about, $150 million has been proposed to continue this innovative program to acquire and activate existing hotels as well as multifamily housing into affordable apartments. This augments this program to almost $3 billion now over 2 years, and almost over 10,000 units have been created thanks to this innovative program. So this is an important kind of tool in the toolbox. And then finally, there's a new interim housing solutions program, $500 million over 2 years, which will provide turnkey rapid housing and services connections for people experiencing homelessness living on state-owned land. Next slide, please. And now moving on to CalICH, you heard a lot about HAP 3. Thank you, just approved the framework to review and approve the local homelessness action plans. As Victor mentioned, there are actually 2 rounds coming close on the heels of round 3. You will see another round, HAP round 4. And this, as Victor mentioned, is one-time block grant funding based on formula and requiring jurisdictions to fund evidence-based practices and create local action plans. And this, as was discussed, is going to be an important tool, especially when there's overlapping jurisdictions, to really create opportunities for joint impact and accountability. And then the final thing we wanted to uplift, which Secretary Castro Ramirez mentioned also in her remarks at the top of the meeting, is the expansion of the encampment resolution grant. So there's a $500 million augmentation being proposed to really support communities to help people living in unsheltered situations. And this really builds on, as Secretary Castro Ramirez mentioned, the $50 million, which was the startup funding for this, but there was so much overwhelming demand that there's $500 million being proposed to really enhance that program. So as you can see, we are really looking to create a portfolio of housing, prevention, interim housing, permanent housing that will really provide the tools at the local level to provide trauma-informed and person across a continuum of needs. And now I'm going to hand it over to Corinne Buchanan, who will provide some highlights from the Health and Human Services Agency, clinically enhanced housing for people who have complex medical and behavioral health issues.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dakshika, for the overview of the BCSH related homelessness investments. I'm Corinne Buchanan. I serve as Deputy Secretary for Policy and Strategic Planning with CalHHS. And I'm going to take a moment to talk a little bit about the work on the CalHHS side of the house today. So it is hard to talk about 22-23 without talking about the historic investments made in 21-22, quite unprecedented level of investments. So, and it's particularly important, I think, because the work we're doing this year really builds on those foundational investments from the previous year. So we'll take a moment and talk about last year, just to say that we made some significant investments in both the embedding housing programs into our social safety net programs, namely through the work with the Department of Social Services. And then we also made some really significant and important investments through CalAIM and other funding sources into our healthcare delivery system through the Department of Healthcare Services. Looking at you, JC. And then we also made significant investments in infrastructure. So we did that through 2 main programs, the Community Care Expansion Program, which helped us to build new settings that could serve seniors and adults with disabilities, including those who are experiencing homelessness, as well as infrastructure funds through the Behavioral Health Continuum Infrastructure Program to create new treatment settings across California. So we'll go ahead and move on now. We'll take us to present day and talk about our proposals in the May revise. So as Dr. Ghali mentioned, the proposals this year are particularly focused on our behavioral health population. So we have proposed what we're calling behavioral health bridge housing. And this is really designed to meet the needs for individuals who have complex behavioral health conditions. And as we've discussed, we've got big investments through community care expansion, lots of new resources coming online through the Behavioral Health Continuum Infrastructure Project. We've also got Home Key, but those will take a couple of years to come to till we get to the point where we're doing all those ribbon cuttings. And so behavioral health bridge housing is aimed at creating bridge housing or interim housing settings that are clinically enhanced that can serve people in the nearer term to get them on the path towards, especially individuals who are experiencing homelessness and have these most complex behavioral health conditions, on the path to permanent housing. And then the second is investments in care court. And Secretary Ghali talked a little bit about this before, but the vision behind care court is to serve people, again, who have under or untreated behavioral health conditions, namely folks who have schizophrenia spectrum or other psychotic disorders who are at great risk to their own health and safety, to connect those individuals to meaningful wraparound treatment services, as well as, importantly, to housing resources. And the work here is really about helping us to prioritize this population and to leverage the resources that we've made, both of the state resources that we put towards investing in behavioral health treatment, as well as leveraging these historic investments that we've made in ending homelessness. It's about orienting our system towards serving this most vulnerable population through prioritization. I will also say that we are, again, leveraging these various state and including federal and local funding streams to do this. But we've identified a few resources that we'll need to be able to do this logistically. And the first, well, I'll go in order. Here we go. Let's go back a sec. If you can take me back to the slides, thanks. We have something new that we proposed through the care court model called a care supporter, which we'll partnering, our proposal is to work with the Department of Aging to be able to have an individual that would serve each person who's a part of the care program and the care proceedings to help them make supported decisions. So a dedicated staff person whose responsibility it is to help a care participant to identify, communicate, and make their own decisions to the greatest extent possible. So these are funds that would allow us to be able to implement this part of the model that we think is really important. The second is funding to the tune of $15 million for training and technical assistance to help counties and other entities to implement these programs to support the work around identifying housing and working with our judicial branch to make this program a success. And then the last is $40 million to support, of course, the hearings and the council and the work involved in this civil court process. Next slide, please. And then I'll just take a moment to highlight two other parts of our May revised proposal. We also talked a little bit about this before, but I'm now looking at you, Director Clendenin. We have a proposal that is a significant proposal to work on serving people who are felony incompetent to stand trial. So when we talk about care court, we talked about serving people in a more upstream fashion. We're trying to prevent entrances into homelessness, prevent institutionalization, prevent criminalization. But for some people with complex behavioral health conditions who may have become involved in the criminal justice system, we have a proposal to serve those people rather than serving them in a state hospital setting, but to work through the Department of State Hospitals to create community-based settings. So we can do restoration services for this forensic population safely in the community. And so funding can support, as I mentioned, community-based restoration as well as mental health diversion. And what this looks like is often housing settings that meet the needs of this population with comprehensive wraparound behavioral health services. And I think it's important for this group, you all, the council, to be familiar with this proposal, because when we look at data on who are these individuals who end up facing felony charges, who are incompetent to stand trial, we find that around 2/3 of them are individuals who were experiencing homelessness at the time of arrest. So this really is our population and our highly vulnerable population. And many of the solutions that we use to address homelessness, clinically enhanced wraparound services, work really well just to help these folks get integrated back into the community and ultimately on the path to permanent housing. And then the last one, I couldn't help myself. It's not a big ticket item, but I think it's really important. And that is, we have an additional 42 million in the May revise on in terms of overdose prevention. And of that 42 million, we've got a 10 million that's earmarked specifically to provide life-saving overdose reversal medications aimed at serving people who are experiencing homelessness to prevent overdose deaths. So we're looking forward to hopefully getting that one off the ground. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it back to Giselle. Thanks so much.
So Giselle, before we move on to the next agenda item, I just wanted to facilitate quickly just any conversation with the council about these May revision proposals, get some feedback, get hopefully points of excitement. But before we do, Corinne, I'm going to put you back on the spot. And you said it nicely that it's hard to think about this proposed budget without thinking about prior investments. And I know for the BCHIP program and CCE, the two programs that they're sort of in progress. Could you, I know we're looking at a number of different streams, and JC and Kim, you may want to jump in, but just, I know we're not standing in place. Like, we're continuing to work to get these other things out as we build even new opportunities. So whomever would like to take it.
I'd be more than happy to start and then turn it over to Kim. So yes, DHCS is working hard. So for the investments previously, it was about 2.2 billion for the BCHIP program or Behavioral Health Continuum Infrastructure Program. We are on round 3, where we received a significant number of launch-ready programs across the state of California, really working to build out the full continuum of behavioral health services. So both mental health and substance use disorder services. Really exciting work. Round 4, we are already doing listening sessions and technical assistance, which is focused on children and youth. So that is coming to a theater near you. Please be paying attention closely for that one. And then we will have round 5 and 6 later this year, which is kind of a broader based open application process if you're not launch ready or you're not focused on children and youth, with huge opportunities for infrastructure building. And we are working very closely with DSS. So I'll turn it over to Kim.
Thank you, JC. Yes, 570 million of the 805 million investment for the Community Care Expansion Fund was made available through that joint request for applications with the Behavioral Health Continuum and Infrastructure Program that JC just mentioned. So again, that effort is really looking at the acquisition, construction, and or rehabilitation of adult and senior care programs across the state. And the additional $195 million will be made available in the coming weeks for facility preservation, which also includes a $55 million operating subsidy payment for existing programs to take advantage of. So we are absolutely excited to have joint applications from jurisdictions to be able to make some additional investments, as JC said, across the continuum to support these populations. So absolutely exciting. One that we're excited about implementing in real time.
Thanks. I know a lot of tremendous work from the teams. Okay, open it up to other council members with feedback, comments. Yes, Veronica, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Shika and Corinne. 2 questions. The behavioral, well, 2 comments maybe. 2 questions, 1 comment. The behavioral bridge housing, is that a brand new program to the state? And are we looking at those being licensed? I hope not, but is that brand new? Is that a new classification? And if so, does it require state certification?
I'll go ahead and answer that. So the Department of Healthcare Services will be overseeing the bridge housing funding. We're going to do it in two parts. So there's going to be a portion that will just be allocated directly to counties. So there'll be a counties and tribes, I should say. So a portion of the funds, we're still trying to determine which portion of the 1.5 billion would be just an allocation, and then there'll be competitive grants. And really that's to be able to provide wraparound services, rental assistance, whatever is needed at the county level to ensure that people with behavioral health, serious behavioral health services are getting housing, but with additional wrap services being provided by our county behavioral health partners.
And I'll just add that we use the behavioral bridge housing term as an umbrella term that could be inclusive of both licensed settings as well as shelter settings that have clinically enhanced supports. Yeah. So.
Okay, that's great. And is there any plan to coordinate with people returning from in custody, whether it's state or county?
So what I would say is in the long term, yes. So one of our initiatives under CalAIM is a justice kind of both in reach. So we're providing 90-day services in reach. We're hoping for a federal approval at this time. We're still negotiating it. And then it will have a coordinated reentry. And one of the biggest pieces that we are wanting to do is making sure that coordinated reentry is engaging with all the right players, whether that's behavioral health, housing, especially these types of funds. So that is the future of what we are trying to look at. Yes.
Okay, I would just add, because I work in the reentry space, work with a lot of the off the grid folks that are in the community that really are the kind of unseen safety net. And so that's the reason I asked about the classification. I'm glad to hear it's not just licensure, but as you're rolling it out to the county and giving them parameters, I hope that we can really seriously, as we continue to build out community infrastructure for all the things I've heard, make sure that we figure out a way to, those grassroots organizations that were created by people who were formerly incarcerated, created by people who had their own experiences. Like, I think it's going to be critically important that as those dollars roll out, those folks can access the dollars, because that's one of the biggest pieces of feedback I hear from those smaller agencies. So I want to offer that, but I'm excited about it. I think it's great. And then the only other thing I had, my third question is for the care piece, the $10 million for the care support, I think is a great concept. I didn't understand why it's coming in the Department of Aging. And I don't know Department of Aging because I know we're talking about people of all ages having access to this or being seen through the care. So can you say a little bit about that?
I'm happy to introduce you to the California Department of Aging. The thinking behind placing the supporter roles with our department is, first, we'll be contracting with local providers who will hire people on the ground who have lived experience and a background to really connect peer-to-peer as a supporter. Our department's experience, we run the state's long-term care ombudsman program. So we represent the residents who are in residential care and skilled nursing. We are the advocate for the resident, and we make sure that their wishes and preferences and rights are priorities in that setting. We also have a new program, the Office of the Patient Representative. We're seeing more and more individuals who do not have family and who are unrepresented. And we're operating a similar model where we're working with local partners on the ground to pair up with individuals who are unrepresented in skilled nursing facilities.
Thanks for the questions, comments. Others? Looking around. Okay, I know we had a little time to make up, so I'm going to make it up here. I'll just close by saying, I think at some point it's never a bad use of time to have a reminder from JC and others about all of the great work happening in the Medicaid space, that sort of program that really focuses on health but drives towards equity in every part of it, and its work around the justice-involved population. And just a reminder that Medicaid, Kathy, you know this as well as anybody, there's a long-held inmate exemption that doesn't allow us to use Medicaid for people who are incarcerated. And through the Whole Person Care Pilot Program over the last 6 years, 6.5, whatever it is, California has really pushed that envelope, and now under Michelle and JC's leadership, really pushing it even farther to see how we make sure that those who are incarcerated don't aren't deprived of some of those essential Medicaid services, and not just while they're incarcerated, but upon reentry. So I think really exciting work that you're leading and related to the work we're talking about here in real ways. So Lourdes, do you want to make any comments on this?
Yes, actually, just building on your remarks, Secretary Galley, I think it's very exciting that the budget that the governor has put forward builds on the tremendous momentum and progress that we're making in the human services space, in the social services space, in the housing space. And, from a housing perspective, and Dakshika, commented on this as she provided the overview in terms of the investments that are in the proposed budget. But the focus for the housing entities within agency that are sort of taking the lead in terms of moving forward these investments at the local level are really focused on advancing the state's statewide housing plan, which was released about 2 months ago. And the statewide housing plan calls for the construction of 2.5 million new units by 2030, of which 1 million of those units should be dedicated for low-income households. So as we continue to look at investments and leveraging and working with communities, we're very mindful of targeting and leveraging those resources to ensure that we're providing units that are affordable to those communities that were hardest hit by the pandemic, those communities that are really struggling to find safe, affordable, accessible housing. And so hence, Home Key will continue to be an initiative and a priority for this administration. Just about a month ago, or maybe less than a month ago, we reached 10,000 units built under Home Key, a testament again to the local capacity and the momentum. And as Dakshika mentioned, there is additional funding that the governor is proposing to continue to build on that progress. But beyond that, from a climate perspective, we know that where housing is located, the location of housing relative to jobs, to transportation, to a neighborhood that is walkable is equally important. And so we will continue to focus on working in partnership with local entities to locate housing investments in areas that enable us to improve not only the overall quality of a person's health and housing, but also the overall quality of that neighborhood. So again, I think that this administration, from a housing, from a human services perspective, from a person-centered perspective, is doing really a tremendous job in terms of reversing 40, 50 years of not investing at this level. And it's just wonderful to see so much commitment, so much hard work taking place, not only at the state level, but really the hard work takes place at the local level, right? The partners and the organizations and the developers and the builders and the community builders that are doing all of this work. So thank you both, Corinne and Dakshika, for the presentation, and thank you for your partnership, Secretary Galley.
Great, thanks, Lourdes. Turn it back to you, Julie.
Indeed. So a couple updates before we move on to item number 7, the statewide action plan for preventing and ending homelessness. In an effort to make up a little bit of time in our agenda, we are going to be skipping the break and going straight into the action plan. And so without further ado, I'll get us started. Thank you, Giselle. For this item, I'll be providing an introduction and an overview of the revision process. I'll turn to our consultant, Matthew Doherty, to provide details and examples of our process when relevant. Once we provide this background information, I'll turn it back to our council co-chairs who will provide some framing for our discussion. Next slide, please. Slide shows a little bit of what we'll be covering today, but before I dive in, I'd like to report out that since our last meeting, our council members did provide input about the topics they would like us to focus on in these meetings via a council member survey, and the responses track very closely, not surprisingly, to the topics that we will cover in this agenda item. Among the top issues members would like us to focus on are increasing shared responsibility and accountability across the state, strengthening our system, and increasing our work around homelessness prevention. I think many of these themes have already popped up in our meeting so far, and I have no doubt that we'll move into a robust conversation around these issues. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background around our action plan to date, our activities around our action plan to date. Last March, this council, at that time, the Homeless Coordinating and Financing Council did adopt the first action plan for preventing and ending homelessness in California. It was adopted to cover activities in fiscal year 2021 through fiscal year 22-23. At that time, many departments were able to forecast 2021, 21-22 to some extent, but were not able to forecast further out. And so the plan was initially adopted with a commitment to make updates and modifications in this year. We believe that this timing is opportune given the new makeup of the council and the continued growth of our work and the leaders that are represented here on our council. Next slide, please. Want to ground us in the big picture idea around our state action plan. The vision, as noted earlier, is to increase leadership from the state for identifying, supporting short-term and long-term solutions. We focused on it being action-oriented and purposeful and aligned across state agencies and programs. And we see the action plan as a place for stronger collaborative partnerships, both of the departments that are represented at Cal ICH and across the state and with our local partners. Next slide, please. A little bit about our updating process. First off, I'd like to thank all of our council members for making your staff available. To date, we've had input discussion with council agencies and departments. Many of you have dedicated multiple staff to this process over multiple meetings, many emails in service of updating your activities for this action plan. We've also talked with external stakeholders, including people with lived expertise. We began those activities last month. We also held 2 virtual input sessions that were open to the public that were led by Cal ICH's policy team. We'll continue identifying new and refined activities. So a note about our action plan, our co-chairs have expressed a desire to keep our action areas as they are currently, with the opportunity to identify and refine activities within those objectives. In some cases, we will be refining objectives for clarity. At the time of drafting, we tried to do it in a couple spots. We tried to squeeze a lot of thinking into one objective. With a little bit of time and clarity, we've discovered that they actually need a little bit of simplification. And more importantly, we'll show some examples of this towards the latter part of our presentation, but we will be refining objectives to reflect the full range of activities of our council. Next slide, please. And just to ground us, I know folks are very familiar with these action areas. Our action plan is divided into 5 action areas. The first starting with strengthening our system and following along a continuum that begins with equitably addressing the health and service needs of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness through a continuum of housing, and rounding out at action area 5, which is focused around prevention. With that, I'll pass it on to Matthew Doherty, who's been leading our charge around the revisions. Thank you, Matthew. Matthew, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Perfect. Sorry about that. So I'm Matthew Doherty. I'm an independent consultant who's been working with the state for the last couple of years. I helped lead the development of the initial action plan, and now I'm supporting the Cal ICH team and all of the member agencies and departments through this update process. And I really want to thank all of the state staff who have spent a great deal of time talking with us about activities for the coming year and working with us to refine the plan so that it will reflect fully the roles of all of the member agencies and departments, including the new member agencies and departments. We have been getting a lot of feedback from stakeholders as part of this process. This slide is merely meant to indicate that we're getting a lot of different kinds of input covering a wide range of topics. And I just want to spend a few minutes highlighting some of the most significant recurring themes that are coming in through that stakeholder input. Next slide, please. On the virtual input sessions that Julie mentioned, one of the questions we asked was if participants indicate if the state were to apply more focus and attention in any one area of the plan, any of the action areas, where would they want the state to place even greater focus or attention? It should not be interpreted that this means that any of the action areas are not important or are being deprioritized by the participants, but we made them choose one action area where they felt that it was most important for the state to place greater focus and attention, or even greater focus and attention. And this slide indicates kind of the ranked order of the action areas through that process, with, not surprisingly, the greatest emphasis being placed on the importance of being able to expand and ensure equitable access to permanent housing, followed by strengthening systems for responding to homelessness and preventing homelessness, followed by the specific action area focused on prevention strategies, followed by effective sheltering and interim housing, followed by addressing the services needs and health and safety needs of people who are unsheltered. Again, important to remember that all of these action areas were seen as important, but we did ask people to rank where they most like to see the state place even greater focus and attention. Next slide, please. Some of the key themes that have come in through all of the conversations include, not surprisingly, given the last slide, but permanent housing supply, and making sure that there's adequate housing opportunities for people who are exiting homelessness so that the rest of the homelessness response system can work effectively and connect people to strong outcomes. There's been a lot of feedback related to streamlining requirements and processes, and that this is about programs across multiple agencies and departments, and to really help communities address the challenges they are facing right now with aligning all of the different funding that's coming into their community from many different sources, oftentimes into different parts or sectors of their systems. And a lot of struggles communities are having with aligning capital resources, rental assistance, operations services, and putting those all together. So they're asking for more state support and guidance for how to align those resources and use them effectively, including guidance and support regarding aligning housing strategies and health and behavioral health strategies to be able to reach vulnerable populations and to increase their impact. We also are getting feedback about the importance of tailoring policies, analyses, funding, and practices for specific populations, knowing that homelessness is not a one-size-fits-all experience, and we can't support one-size-fits-all solutions. Specific populations that have been emphasized, including thinking through the specialized needs of youth, survivors of domestic and intimate partner violence, older adults, LGBTQ populations, and others. Next slide, please. Some additional feedback has also been around needing to see more flexible resources that can support a range of program models and a range of people's needs. Oftentimes at the community level, it's the flexibility of resources is most important in them being able to tailor solutions for people's individualized needs. Also a strong emphasis on the importance of being able to create and sustain alternate models for providing shelter and interim housing options to try to scale up those solutions in communities. Strong amount of feedback focused on the importance of preventing homelessness, especially among people re-entering communities from jails, prisons, and other institutional settings. And I know that's been an area of discussion of the meeting today already. People are also asking if the state can help support their efforts to create non-punitive, non-criminalizing approaches to addressing unsheltered homelessness and encampments, knowing that in communities, oftentimes there are pressures to respond to unsheltered homelessness in ways that can be punitive, criminalizing, or traumatizing for people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And then one theme that has come through very strongly is the challenge of recruiting and retaining a strong workforce, which is obviously impacting many different sectors in our economy, but is having profound impacts on the homelessness response sector, impacting their capacity to deploy resources effectively to achieve the impact that they're seeking. But people have also highlighted just the longstanding issues with wage rates that have, and the issues those wages have on the quality and reliability of staffing. And I would say that this capacity challenge comes through not just at the programmatic level, but also at the policy, planning, and partnership level, and that these systems are often very strained to be able to be responding in the comprehensive ways that they want to, and that the state programs and policies are asking them to. Next slide, please. Finally, we've also been asking people that if the state were to engage in communications efforts, what kinds of communication strategies would help support their local efforts and progress. And some of the themes that have come through here have been trying to make sure the state is helping to reinforce the importance of housing first, harm reduction, trauma-informed care and practices, other best practices that helps local communities stay focused on those practices and resist efforts to pull them towards other kinds of practices. A great deal of feedback around the importance of the state trying to help reduce stigma around the issues of homelessness, around mental health, around substance use disorders, and that can help them advance solutions locally. Communities are reporting a lot of challenges with not in my backyard advocacy and looking for the state to see if the state could help support advocacy and arguments that would counter NIMBY advocacy. They would like to see the state holding up successes at the individual, the program, and the community level to help, again, to help them stay focused on the best practices and help their communities recognize and support those best practices. Important in making sure the state is helping communicate the fundamental role that the lack of housing affordability plays in the creation and challenges of ending homelessness. And then also feedback that the state continue to communicate the full range of investments across multiple parts of the system, how essential that is for success, and how there is no one type of program alone that can help prevent and end homelessness at local level. There's no simple solution, but we need these kinds of investments across the entire system. So that's the kind of feedback that we've been receiving through the stakeholder input processes so far, and we'll be working to address that feedback as we work with the member agencies and departments to identify specific strategies and activities for the coming fiscal year. I'm going to turn it back to Julie.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Giselle, next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, here are a couple examples, concrete examples of some of the refinements that we may be making in this plan. So the first refinement here is just an example of simplifying language. Pretty straightforward. Next slide, please. This slide depicts an objective that we are making more complete to be reflective of additional council departments. So in this example, we did add the role of public health in developing strategies to support California communities to develop disaster preparedness guidelines, for example. I'm going to pass the mic to Cody to talk us through the next steps.
Great. Hi, all. As a reminder, I'm Cody Ziegler, Director of Statewide Policy. Thanks again for being here today. So just going to run through the next steps with you that our team's going to take to get this update in front of you. So, through early July 2022, we're going to keep working with you and your teams to refine the language of the activities that we're putting into the updated action plan. With a little bit of wiggle room through August, of course, to reflect any final budget or new statutes that might, add or change some of those activities in the plan. So there's flexibility through that time as well. We're going to plan to, on the side, be working on the introductory and framing content, just editing that for clarity and for the direction we're moving through mid-August, with our final goal, of course, of, having another discussion here with you all and considering recommendation for adoption of the updated plan at our next council meeting, which is September 1st, 2022. So I'm going to give it back to Julie, and interested to hear your thoughts on all of this.
Thanks, Cody. Before I pass the mic back to our co-chairs, to facilitate a conversation among our council members, and then for public comment a few minutes after that. Just want to point out that a lot of what we just presented on is on process. And one of the things that Cal ICH staff have the benefit of is being in nearly day-to-day, at least week-to-week contact with all of the representatives from the departments and agencies y'all represent. And a couple things have come up. Every single person that is on the council has quite a bit of knowledge and desire to see our system improve. And we really see the action plan as an opportunity for us to marshal both our efforts and organize and strategize around what we all want to see. So back to that earlier slide around our shared vision as a state, I do think this is the opportunity for us to get there. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass it back to our co-chairs to provide some framing remarks before we open it up for discussion with our council. Co-chair Lourdes Castro Ramirez and co-chair Dr. Mark Galley, back to you.
Thank you, Julie, Matthew, and Corey. Really appreciate the concise presentation. I guess the first comment I think about is this is our action plan. This is really about the council putting its foot forward, saying, this is what we expect to do. This is how we expect to take all of the exciting opportunities that often live in our own departments and our own agencies and try to bring them together and be accountable. We talked earlier about the great work that we're expecting with the funding at the local level around transparency, clarity, accountability. This is our opportunity to be clear and accountable to some of our own goals and work. And I appreciate the goal of moving towards simple, clear objectives, prioritizing what matters, and then really kind of seeing ourselves in all of that work. So on top of these two questions, I think I would love to just ask each of you where you already see yourself in this work and where you might not yet see yourself, and where we want to push ourselves towards. So I think it's an exciting opportunity to make sure our collective mark is on what this council does, and that we take this as an opportunity to do what we expect to happen at the local level ourselves here at the state level. So with that, I'll turn it to you, Lourdes, and then open it up to the whole council.
Thank you. I think that's exactly right, Secretary Galley. We spent probably more time than allotted during today's meeting speaking about the local homelessness action plan. And I think it was important for us to spend time understanding the process, understanding the expectations, because I think that these plans will basically be the North Star for communities. And in a similar vein, the state action plan to prevent and end homelessness will be our plan, our North Star, and the opportunity for us to take a look at the collective work that each department and agency is doing, and to essentially align and integrate to the extent that we can integrate our efforts with intention, with a focus on clarity, as the secretary mentioned, but also with a focus on measuring our progress. And what I would just ask as we have this discussion is any suggestions or ideas that you all may have with regard to how to embed in this plan measurable outcomes, or how to essentially use this plan to report out in a more sort of public fashion how we're working together in alignment, but also how we're measuring the effort and the impact of the state's initiatives, the state's investments, and our collective work. I will also just mention that the governor says this quite frequently, and I really appreciate that he recognizes that the state had not had a comprehensive, cohesive plan to prevent and end homelessness. This was instituted in 2021 by many of you that are here and a few other council members. And I think it's important to know that we're not starting from ground zero. There is a lot of heavy lifting that has already been accomplished, and we're at the point now of refining, simplifying, making things more clear, but also making sure that we are finding better ways to measure and to speak to the impact of the work that we're doing at the state level. Great.
Great, thank you, Lourdes. I want to start maybe unfairly, Susan, I'm going to pick on you. Especially the second question, where there's greater interagency and interdepartmental collaboration potential. And I know you and I have talked a little bit about, well, where do older Californians fit into this conversation? Can we do more? Should we be doing more? But love your reflections and thoughts, and then open it up generally to the whole group. So.
Great, I'm happy to get started. For those who aren't familiar, California has a master plan for aging, a 10-year roadmap. And goal 1 in the master plan is housing for all ages and stages. And a goal of the master plan is to end older adult homelessness. We just took a report from our stakeholders. We're at the 18-month mark. And they just critiqued our first year of performance and asked us to double down on 2 areas. One is expanding home and community-based services, and the other is to get serious about ending older adult homelessness. And that's something that we can track and measure. We know that that's one of the fastest growing segments of the homeless population, people 50 and above or 65 and above. And we have the added factor that this is a growing demographic overall. So our state is facing explosive growth among this population. We also know that we're coming up on the lifting of the eviction moratorium. We know that individuals who live on SSI, SSP, it's about $1,040 a month total. So that we know that rising housing costs are out of reach. I was in Marin County last week, and a woman told me in her affordable senior housing complex, she's been there less than a year and her rent was just raised $250 a month. So that's a significant, we're expecting rent increases. So this is an area that admittedly the older adult and disability, well, I'll speak for the older adult community, we haven't done a lot of advocacy in the housing space historically. And at the local level, I'm concerned about, when we're updating the housing element, that our constituents aren't familiar with the local landscape, and they're not often in the right places and the right meetings advocating. We've traditionally been more focused on health and human services. So I'm a big fan of the interagency collaboration and partnership. This is one outstanding example of that happening. The Department of Aging was just added this year, and thank you so much for the privilege of serving here and representing older adults. We're doing our best to make sure that our constituents are at the local level at all of these meetings, weighing in on the local housing plans, homelessness action plans, and then we're doing our part to share with them all of those opportunities. And in turn, anything that we should know about, I learn it here, so thank you for that.
Thanks, Susan. Other council members? Yeah, Joe, go ahead, please.
I'd like to pick up on a couple points that Susan has started. On the housing side, especially for people with disabilities, it's not just availability, it's accessibility, not accessibility in terms of only can I get to it. If I can get to it, can I get in it? And if I can get in it, can I live in it? Can I get around? So I think that's has to continue to be a big piece of addressing housing. But the other piece that I haven't heard as much conversation about, and perhaps it's to come, is on the employment side. So how do we go upstream in the employment world and keep people from losing their jobs, which can often lead to homelessness? And then is the work that we're doing with the homeless population right now putting them on a path where they don't return to homelessness because they don't have the employment to sustain themselves and sustain housing and meet their basic needs. So I think there's that upstream factor that you talk about more quite a bit is I think a really important part. And I think it needs to continue to look at how does employment play an important role in that.
Thanks, Joe. Others? Go ahead.
I can go for housing and community development. I think it's important to talk about one of the activities you don't see in the budget because not all of our work happens there. So in the action plan, something I think I'm really excited about is the addition of our housing accountability work around homelessness. A lot has been done in the legislature to make it easier and more streamlined to approve and build permanent supportive housing that'll serve extremely low income households. But we're seeing time and time again that without that extra push, it's not actually happening. And so I think that we're expecting a big part of our growth to be really making our presence known in communities. And I think what we're seeing the vast majority of the time is local governments see us as a partner or an ally, not an adversary, but they want us to be the bad guy. They want us to be the one saying, you have to do this. And I'm happy to play that role. I'll play it all day long. It's the much fewer circumstances where we really meet that recalcitrant jurisdiction that doesn't want to be making a difference here. I think because mostly people see how essential this is to the operation, the growth, the evolution of their communities, the livelihood of their communities. And so we're showing up in that space a lot more often. We're hoping that that becomes more of a norm and that people understand that we aren't gonna sort of ignore it if they're not approving housing that's meant to be approved. So that's something I think I wanted to kind of point out that I think is important in the action plan from our perspective.
Thanks, Megan. Others? Tomas.
Okay, yes, I want to just point out from the Department of Public Health perspective. So the area that we're going to be more involved in is going to be Action Area 2, which is really ensuring services for those who are unsheltered. One of the challenges that we had during COVID, but it also dealt with air quality, heat waves, is that persons who are homeless until they get housed deserve just as much prevention and public health services as everybody else. And so we're going to be working hard to make sure that we coordinate local health departments to the continuum of care. The other area that we're going to be focusing on with in the area of communicable diseases like COVID, there's other communicable diseases that circulate more broadly in these populations that are unhoused. So we're really going to be promoting some basic public health things like sanitation, hygiene, making sure that those things are accessible. And then the last area, again, it's going to be very important, is us really connecting folks who are on the ground who are dealing with overdose prevention and making sure that they have access to naloxone. So really trying to get our local health department colleagues and partners to work closely with those who are working with the homeless.
Thank you, Tomas. Yes.
Hi, Nancy Robles. I'm the Executive Director of the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee and also the California Debt Limit Allocation Committee. And what that means is we provide bonds and tax credits that investors purchase to create affordable housing projects. And we have a dilemma right now with our affordable housing is that we are 3 times oversubscribed. So even though we get $4.3 billion a year for affordable housing, we get about 12 billion in applications. So one of the things that we're doing right now is on a federal level, we're trying to have what's called our 50% test, which means when you take out a bond, 50% of your financing has to be with a bond in order to get a tax credit. So on a federal level, we're making an ask to reduce that 50% test to 25%. And that way we could potentially double the amount of bonds and tax credits that we could get out there to create more projects.
Great, thank you. Yes, Stephen.
So I'll talk about one impactful thing we can do at Caltrans, and we're kind of the odd duck at this table. But one thing we do have is property, and we have and would look to continue to lease property for a nominal fee, usually like $1 to a city or a county, really to provide sites for interim housing. If it's going to be years until we really start to see big movements on permanent affordable housing, we can provide right away for that purpose at very low cost. And we have done that already in several cases, and we'll be looking to identify more suitable and safe locations in the future.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. I know we've taken that opportunity up in the past, as you mentioned, and with some of the additional May revision proposed allocations to focus on what we can do on state property, I think that will continue to be a go-to strategy. So looking for those opportunities and partnerships with locals is going to be key. Megan, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I didn't want to steal your thunder at all there, but our public lands for affordable housing team has been incredibly grateful for some of the movement at Caltrans on this and really trying to make more land available for affordable housing. And so I think we'll also be seeing a greater amount of the Caltrans portfolio in our excess sites for affordable housing executive order program, which will be a huge win. So really, really grateful for that partnership.
Great. Go Stephanie first.
All right, Stephanie Clendenin, Director for the Department of State Hospitals. And as we look to integrate our work into the action plan, we see that our work will align with action area number 3, which is expanding communities' capacity to provide safe and effective sheltering and interim housing, largely with the investments that both Secretary Galley and Deputy Secretary Buchanan both mentioned around investing into the felony incompetent to stand trial population and really building out, and they didn't really say the number, but it's 5,000 beds over 4 years is the plan to really support treatment and wraparound services for individuals with serious behavioral health conditions that are engaged in the criminal justice system and in this classification and have been determined to be felony incompetent to stand trial. And then the other action area that our work aligns really well with is preventing Californians from experiencing the crisis of homelessness. And as we think about our work around the reentry of our population back into the community, expanding our programs for reentry, and as well as partnering with our local partners and really thinking about how we do really purposeful and well-planned discharge planning as someone moves out of a state hospital and back into the community, ensure that they have the services and the supports that they need. And when I think about, to your question, Dr. Galley, around the kind of, where do we need more collaboration and engagement? And I think when I just think about the individuals that we serve, around individuals, again, with serious behavioral health conditions, it takes everybody coming together to serve one individual. There's so much misunderstanding, particularly when you think about somebody who has serious mental illness and criminal justice involvement, and the individuals that we see that have long histories of criminal justice involvement. There's a lot of misunderstanding on how to serve this population. And so it really takes all of the criminal justice partners, all of the local partners, all of us here at the state level as well, engaged together to really think about those solutions. So it's really not just interagency, interdepartmental, but also down to the local level, all of us working together.
Can't agree more. Go to JC and then Kim.
So one of the items that we have added, and I mentioned it earlier, is the Housing and Homelessness Incentive Program. one of the pieces that we're acknowledging at DHCS is under the ACA, we expanded coverage to adults. But we didn't actually stop and build the delivery system that they need around them. And someone experiencing a homelessness often isn't served well by the healthcare system. And so we're really trying to build out the health related, homeless and housing continuum within our program and partnering with managed care plans to do that. And so this incentive program is how do we bring those two worlds together? Managed care plans who are very new to this world and they're entering into a new environment with new partners and new players. How do we forge those partnerships and linkages and infrastructure, not just at the plan level, but really connecting that with the providers who do this today. And so there's a new investment there where we're really pushing forward. I would also say that we will learn a lot from these new partnerships and relationships and really hoping to make sure that we tweak our policies over the next few years to make sure we're hitting the mark and not just starting where we began, but really evolving that over time. I think the two pieces I would want to raise on the interagency piece for future conversations and leveling up in the action plan is, I mentioned earlier, the local braided funding partnerships. Since there are new dollars and new Medicaid and federal dollars, making sure that we are maximizing those dollars at the local level, making sure people are understanding what those opportunities are. I just think it's a really important thing as we all sit here from different lenses, making sure we're maximizing those federal dollars, as well as the kind of braided funding, which will be really complicated at the local level. And then data sharing. We can't do this without data sharing, in my opinion. And so really thinking about how we comprehensively do that across so many systems, I think will be a really important one. I know there's been a lot of great conversations. And then I just wanted to lift up what Joe mentioned earlier. A lot of the stuff that we currently have in our space is really once someone is experiencing homelessness. And I think there's an opportunity in Medicaid and in Medi-Cal specifically to go a little bit more upstream in this space. And so making sure that we stretch our muscles a little bit here and think a little bit more upstream with this particular population as well.
James JC. Kim, go ahead.
Kim Johnson, Department of Social Services. A lot to echo in what JC just said. I want to maybe start with, though, where the stakeholders started in their ranking around expanding and ensuring equitable access to permanent housing in our communities and just lifting up the tremendous success in communities across California with Project Room Key, which has supported 50,000 individuals to date, and just really appreciate Secretary Castro Ramirez's comments around the 10,000 permanent housing solutions through Home Key that went through that, and how we can learn from that experience in terms of how we're now putting through resources and case management on the ground at the Project Room Key sites to help make that transition and support people to reach their housing goals. So I think that's critical, and we're very excited to continue that effort with communities. But I also would say to the second question, the data is also very exciting to me, and also in the space of equity, where we can really lift up what we are learning about these programs and their success, who they're successful for, who they are not, and why, and how that informs our future approaches, especially as it relates to race, as it relates to, I know we lift up tribes, we lift up different population groups and other equity factors, as were mentioned here as well this afternoon. So I think that's a huge piece. And I think also in that approach, and I think it's something that all of us strive to do, but will do even more, is that lifting up of those who have lived through these experiences and informing us in our work. And I know that's woven throughout this plan. I think it's just critical to, again, inform our strategies with those data components as we go forward.
Thank you, Kim. Others? Yeah, go ahead, Veronica.
Well, I know I'm not a department head, but I'm excited to be here because I literally touch just about everything everybody does. We're a reentry provider. I got 12 teams on the ground serving people that are unsheltered. Even Caltrans, we're talking to Watts about a tiny home community, blossoming developer because of Project Home Key. So I literally touch just about everything all your departments do, and I'm very grateful to be here and that you all are here because I can clearly see what the gaps are and the opportunities are. And so I look forward to continued conversations to build this out. To specifically answer your question number two, question number two though. For area number 5, I think, I'm hearing the term upstream, but early intervention and actually having objectives directly related to early intervention. And so what we do know about the face of homelessness is that it's not a monolith, it's changing, but significantly there's an increase, and I see it because I'm one of the access centers in the community that has the highest incidence of family homelessness. Families, when I say families, I mean families with children. It's purely economic, primarily. And so early intervention does not mean you don't have to have a 3-day notice in your hand, for example. So even many of the prevention programs the state are currently funding is because you're at imminent risk. And so when we talk about early intervention, and we're piloting a couple of our ideas with some of our council members, it goes further upstream, and I don't hear a lot of reference to that, and I don't see any objectives specifically for that. And I would offer that we have an early intervention objective under area number 5. And then the other thing I want to say, I've been in the homeless space for over 15 years now, and on any given night, my organization is keeping about 1,200 people off the street in a variety of interim housing programs, including about 300 children. And what I can see is I've seen some of the people's children from 10 years ago show up as adults, young adults, or beyond the transitional age youth. And what I don't hear people talk enough about when we talk about intervention and prevention is the children. So we have public social services here, we have Department of Education here. There are some strategies as we've been thinking about how do we really build thriving families, which thereby builds thriving communities. And the children cannot be left out. So even in my own organization, I'm saying, Christmas gifts, Easter baskets, all that stuff is cool, but what are we doing to build so that we don't see these kids again in 10 years? Because we've seen them. I've seen the cycles of families. And so I think that that's a missed opportunity I haven't heard anybody say anything about. There are some things that could be built into children. There's a lot of coordination that could be done with our education systems to try to expose children information they may not necessarily have, to try to stabilize and pour into children so they don't end up in the same situation necessarily as the adults that are taking care of them. And I think that that should be called out in area number 5. And then the other thing I would say, for area number 1, I appreciate the use of the term equity. And I just want to point out, in LA, I participated in the ad hoc committee that created the report in relation to the large disparity of 35% of Black people representing people that are homeless versus a 10% or less general population. And I appreciate equity, but in every category we're looking at here, homelessness, behavioral health, primary health, Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color are either overrepresented or have disparities. And so for me, I would love to see, whether it's tied to the funding coming out of your respective departments or even some objectives here, some very clear language about how to move the jurisdictions that you're working with to actually demonstrate that they are implementing systems, strategies, plans to address those disparities, because everybody here knows about them. But I wasn't here when you all created this, so maybe you had a robust conversation about it. I'm only looking at what I can see, but I just want to lift up BIPOC folks are underrepresented, overrepresented in every category that's represented here. And so I think that it would be very impactful for the heads of our departments to, in the written plan, make a more bold statement as it relates to that. And then the last thing I want to say is, I can't remember. I didn't write that down. All right, thank you so much.
You said a lot, even though you can't remember the last comment. I mean, I think this is why we're excited to have you on, because you help us see where we have to connect a little better across the departments and agencies here, and wholeheartedly agree that this concept of how we hold ourselves accountable around tracking, implementing, and ensuring that we're taking an equity anchored approach, I think is super important. I know that we're going to run out of time. Any last comments from council members on this?
Well, I just
Oh, go ahead, Lori.
one comment, and it builds off something that Nancy Robles from TCAC and CITLAC mentioned in terms of the advocacy at the federal level. And so this really, cuts across, right, all of the work that we're doing, particularly, I'll just provide an example. So as Councilmember Johnson mentioned, a lot of effort and work lifting up Project Room Key, that, gave way to home key. And so 10,000 units. But we're also very mindful that these 10,000 units will require ongoing level of operating support, and whether that be subsidies or operating funds from the federal government. And so I think it is important for us to also be mindful in the action plan to call out our partners at the federal level and the level of engagement and support that we will need from them to be able to carry out and implement the work that we're doing. I know that USICH has been a really terrific partner, and look forward to potentially also following up and getting their input in terms of how they foresee, I guess, in the future, not just what USICH, what their priorities are, but also some of the other federal agencies that we interact with, whether it's the Health and Human Services or HUD, transportation, and others. So calling out the partnership with the federal government, I think, will be really important in the action plan.
Great. I think we're going to turn it to you, Giselle, to facilitate public comment.
All right, since this is an action item, we will now move to public comments. We have not received any indication for comments from attendees in public, so we will move on to attendees joining online. As a reminder, if you're connected through Zoom, select the raise hand icon in the meeting window on your computer, and we will unmute you to allow you to comment. For those joining by telephone, you may press *9 to indicate you would like to comment. Once I call on you to speak, you'll be instructed to press *6 to unmute yourself. You'll have 1 minute to make your comment. Please keep comments specific to this agenda item. There will be time for general comments at the end of this meeting. We do have a few hands up. First is from Jerry Lalongeberg. All right, Jerry, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I'm Jerry Lalondeberg. I'm a board member of Share Sonoma County. First of all, I want to thank all of you. I don't know if anybody's told you at your job today that you are awesome and wonderful. I really appreciate the attention that you're giving, and it's great to have such thoughtful leaders addressing these issues. I think the most highly impactful thing that I want to suggest to you, which I believe will solve 20% of the housing needs, is this whole concept of shared housing. Shared housing, home matching, and community houses. I would draw your attention to the National Shared Housing Resource Center. You can look that up, the National Shared Housing Resource Center. On that site, you'll identify 17 organizations in California that are doing home sharing. So those folks have access to literally tens of thousands of empty bedrooms in every community. But the process of helping and supporting.
All right, Jerry, your time is up. Thank you for your comment. Next commenter is Joe Coletti. Joe, you are unmuted. You should be allowed to make your comment.
Yes, this is Joe Coletti, Urban Initiatives. 6 quick statements about mortality prevention. Number 1, we want to encourage the council to consider including mortality prevention in the action plan. Number 2, today we Urban Initiatives released a report based on mortality data entitled "More than 1,000 Women Died While Homeless on the Streets of Los Angeles County During the Past 5 Years by Homicide, Suicide, Natural Causes, and Accidents." Number 3, if SB 914 is signed into law, the bill would require the council to set and measure progress toward goals to prevent and end homelessness among unaccompanied women in California. Number 4, we want to encourage the council to consider including mortality prevention into the action plan that requires a focus on statewide coroner homeless mortality data and perhaps integrate in HDIS. Number 5 is 6, the action plan should weave a HER team approach to street outreach and street medicine for women. We came up with HER as an acronym for Homeless Engagement Response. Lastly, number 6.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for your comment. Next, we have Sharon Rapport. Sharon, you should be able to make your comment.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for today's presentations and good discussion. We have strong concerns about emphasis on interim interventions over permanent housing in the governor's May revise, including funding for programs like Returning Home Well, interim housing, and behavioral bridge housing, which totals over $2.5 billion. We also are concerned in light of much of the HAP and Home Key funding are also being used for interim housing. We see interim as a critical component of our state's response to homelessness, but must have balanced permanent housing so people can exit interim stays into housing rather than into homelessness. And I would just mention a California Policy Lab study of people in Los Angeles with serious mental illness who indicated over 33% received interim housing, but fewer than 5% received referrals to permanent housing. We also have strong objections to cure courts. We agree with the concerns Dr. Galley has articulated so well about people languishing outside, but have serious concerns with the coercive approach to treatment and lack of funding for evidence-based housing first trauma-informed approaches to solve these concerns. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sharon, for your comment. Last, we have Crystal Gutenberg. Right, Crystal, you should be able to make your comment.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for such an engaged discussion. This is more of a question versus a comment. I represent private investors, and I didn't hear much about public-private investments, and maybe this is not an appropriate forum, but I'd love to see more resources, or if someone can point me to where I can go to get more engaged in establishing private-public partnership in ending homelessness. I'm ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We also have a hand raised from Alejandra Villa. Alejandra, please say your comment.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alejandra Villa. I'm from the Public Defender's Office in Sacramento County. I just wanted to make a suggestion and see if there's any way to, I know the efforts are for people re-entering population, but what about for pre-trial? We have a couple different counties that have pre-trial programs. So kind of maybe having some funds for the pre-trial folks that have offended before, or kind of we're trying to make sure that they don't re-offend. Thank you.
All right, we have no more. Sorry, one more comment from Mari Castellidi. All right, Mari, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks everyone. I'm Mari Castaldi. I'm the Senior Legislative Advocate on Homelessness at Housing California. Wanted to echo several of the comments from Sharon Report from the Corporation for Supportive Housing about concerns sort of about making sure that we're investing in a balanced homeless response ecosystem that has permanent housing placement so that folks are not sort of stuck languishing in interim housing placements. And also just wanted to sort of lift up what was brought up around the shortage of long-term housing options for folks coming home from state incarceration. And just noting the importance there of making sure we're investing in permanent housing placements specifically for that population as well. And lastly, just wanted to echo the comments that were provided as part of the feedback from the action plan around the importance of investing in the homeless response system workforce. We're hearing from a lot of our service provider partners on the ground about concerns about really being able to make the most of state investments in homelessness without being able to sort of invest equitably.
Thank you, Mari. Your time is up. Thank you for your comment. All right, there are no more hands raised. We could move to a vote.
Great. Just to be clear on what we're voting on, So this is to sort of provide direction on continued revision to the action plan and the timeline that has been articulated. I think we stated it earlier, but several milestones over the next many months, with the intention of, through those different milestones, bringing back the action plan to the September meeting for further discussion and a vote to adopt. So with that in place, looking for a motion.
Kathleen Allison, motion.
JC Cooper, second.
Great, thanks, JC. So Giselle, can we take roll?
Yes, I will call roll. All right. Lourdes Castro Ramirez.
Aye.
Dr. Mark Galley.
Aye.
Kathleen Allison.
Aye.
Dr. Tomas Aragon.
Aye.
Stephanie Clendenin.
Aye.
JC Cooper.
Aye.
Susan Damaris.
Aye.
Lindsay Sin for Dr. Vito Mbasani.
Aye.
Kim Johnson.
Aye.
Stephen Keck.
Aye.
Veronica Lewis.
Aye.
Nancy Robles.
Aye.
Megan Kirkaby for Gustavo Velasquez.
Aye.
And Joe Xavier.
Aye.
All right, the motion passes.
Great, thank you all for a terrific discussion and looking forward to continuing the work. Julie, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. And just a note for members of the public who are listening online, there is contact information for Cal ICH staff at the end of all of the slides that are posted publicly. You can also find contact information for us through the Cal ICH website. Thank you. Moving on to item 8. Really thrilled to be providing some of our staff updates. I know we are short on time and want to encourage folks to look at the written updates. Our federal partners at USICH have also committed and submitted written updates, as have all of the member departments here. So thank you and your staff for providing those. Definitely would suggest going through those. Those are just a treasure trove of information. Next slide, please. So a couple things, as folks know, part of the reformation of Cal ICH included an advisory committee. We will be taking action between now and our next council meeting to start to establish that. We will be presenting more on our progress at our next council meeting. Next slide, please. Really excited to be continuing our work and progress towards our interagency working groups. As folks may remember, part of the approval of the action plan last year included a commitment to the formation of 5 statewide working groups. The first, the State Funding and Programs Working Group, which I co-chair with Deputy Secretary Corinne Buchanan, Deputy Director Zachary Olmsted, have been meeting on a regular basis. A lot of what we've been covering to date have been around thinking through more deeply the engagement of marginalized communities. Specifically, we did focus one of our meetings around tribal outreach, for example. We continue to talk through how we can continue to better streamline the state's funding programs. I will flag that our working group will be submitting our own edits to our charge within the action plan and are eager to get that in front of this body. Next up, Cal ICH staff will be working towards the formation of the Racial Equity Working Group. And once that is up, we will be forming the Youth and Young Adults Working Group. For those who are interested and have questions or would like to provide any suggestions, please do contact any Cal ICH staff. Next slide, please. Next on our updates is our Housing First survey. As many of you know, the implementation and monitoring of the California's Housing First guidelines and regulations is within Cal ICH's enabling statute. We are currently underway with analyzing data that we've collected from 35 programs across 8 state departments, many of the departments represented here. We will be presenting a document that summarizes our findings at our next council meeting. Next slide, please. And last but not least, happy to be reporting that we are underway with our landscape assessment. Within last year's budget, Cal ICH was given resources to conduct a landscape assessment due to the legislature at the end of this year. Cal ICH is currently working with the Turner Center out of UC Berkeley, as well as with the Goldman School, UCSF's Benioff Homelessness and Housing Initiative, and APT to conduct this landscape assessment. High level update is we are attempting to understand how programs are funded, the outputs of the state's funding for the program years 2018 through 2021. And more broadly speaking, we're seeking to provide more detailed information about the types of programs and services that exist across California. I think many of our conversations, both in this room and across the state and with our partners in the legislature, are often based on partial information around what is actually occurring. And so what we are underway with currently is the collection of a rather robust suite of data. There is a Cal ICH webpage dedicated to the landscape assessment. And for those who are interested, I encourage you to go to our website to check out more information. We are due to submit a progress report to the legislature later this year, and more coming on that. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. For the sake of time, want to just preview that our next council meeting will be another action-packed meeting. It will occur on September 1st. We'll provide a report out around the progress of the local homelessness action plan approvals related to HAP 3. We will be submitting an updated version of the statewide action plan for preventing and ending homelessness, as well as a few different updates on our progress. Our last scheduled meeting for 2022, notably, is November 10th. And with that, I will move to the next agenda item 9.
All right, now we will accept general comments. I would like to remind everyone that we are unable to discuss items that are not on the agenda for today's meeting, but we welcome all comments and feedback. We'll begin with members of the public. We have not received any indication for comments, so we will move to attendees online. If you're connected through Zoom, select the raised hand icon in the meeting window of your computer, and we will unmute you for your comment. For those joining us by telephone, you may press *9 to indicate that you'd like to comment. Once I call you to speak, you'll be instructed to press *6 to unmute yourself, and you will have 1 minute to make your comment.
Giselle, I have a question. For members of the public that were not able to complete their remarks during the previous section, can they raise their hand to complete their remarks within 1 minute during this section?
If you would like to complete their comment, please raise your hand and I will allow you to speak.
Thank you.
First, we have Steve McNally. All right, Steve, you should be able to voice your comment.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Steve McNally. I live in Costa Mesa in Orange County, and I'm on a county behavioral health advisory board, but my comments are my own. I love seeing you all together and seeing how much happens when you talk with each other and you can connect. And I'm appreciative that you allow the public to listen in. I guess my ask would be that you ensure what you're doing here gets to the communities, because there is a communication void across the state. And I applaud that you're interagency, but you're not quite yet to the people. And California, we have 4 counties: LA, Orange County, Riverside, San Bernardino, represent 45% of it. We share 1 TV market, 1 radio market, 1 newspaper market. So there are things that could be done.
Please finish your comment.
I thank you very much, with better coordination. And amongst ourselves and engaging and empowering citizens to support your efforts would be very powerful. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be.
Thank you for your comment. We have Jerry Lalonde-Berg. All right, Jerry, please voice your comment.
Thank you again for the prompt to finish my comments. And I 100% want to second what Mr. McNally just said. What I was saying was that there's 17 organizations in California that do home matching now, which represent tens of thousands of empty bedrooms in each county even. I would also like to call attention to the Cal AIM that was sort of obliquely referenced earlier. For the shared housing, as well as the home key, Cal AIM and Cal AIM case management components are going to be a key funding resource in the years to come. And then finally, I just want to say that shared housing creates community and allows people in neighborhoods with support from providers to house elders and to house people with behavioral health challenges in regular houses with other people. But I hope that—
Your time is up. Please finish your comment.
I think I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We have Joe Coletti. Joe, you may voice your comment. Joe, are you able to speak?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. But the last 2 points that I made that you may have heard were, we want to encourage the council to consider including mortality prevention into the action plan that requires a focus on statewide corridor homelessness mortality data and perhaps integrated into HDIS. Then the action plan should weave a HER team approach to street outreach and street medicine for women. We came up with HER as an acronym for homeless engagement response. What you didn't hear me say is that lastly, let it be HER Day today by considering including mortality prevention into the state's first of its kind unprecedented action plan and make history and history. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. All right, those are all the comments we have online. We may proceed to the final agenda item.
Thank you, Giselle. Thank you so much. And thank you to members of the public for joining us, those of you that provided remarks, and those of you that have joined us for the entire meeting. On behalf of Secretary Galley and myself, to all of the council members, thank you so much for your insights, for your comments, for the work that you do every single day. We're very excited and encouraged by the framework that has been adopted today to help essentially evaluate the local homelessness action plans. And as mentioned earlier, we will be receiving a report from staff. We're also, of course, excited with the adoption of the framework to continue updating and amending the action plan to prevent and end homelessness. Also want to just reiterate a few other points here. The materials for this meeting and a meeting summary will be posted on the council's website prior to the next meeting. Also, if you're interested in receiving and staying in touch with us and receiving information about the council's activities, please sign up on the council's email list. There is a newsletter that is going out at least once a month, I believe. So you have the ability to sign up to get connected and stay informed. We also have, of course, several other ways to connect with us through social media as listed on the screen. With that, we're just before, let's see, exact time, 3:58. If there are no other matters, I'd like to go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you all so much.